I wore pants today, just in case.
What a great way to start the show.
Just go ahead and get that out.
You guys all knew what happened last week. I rolled back and I was wearing my shorts, and so kind of got revealed. But everyone else, apologize for unexpected launch of a show. But welcome to TLDR, Valiant TLDR. We are the ultimate deep dive into the history, creators, and behind-the-scenes stories of Valiant Comics. Join myself, the OG 90s Valiant fan, Jason Richardson, a.k.a. Southern Comic Geek, who's been riding the Valiant wave since day one, and Newell Turner, a.k.a. Stingray, the fresh eyes discovering the universe for the very first time. So every week, we'll bring you in-depth reviews, unboxings, exclusive creator interviews as we explore the past, present, and future of the beloved Valiant Universe. What's up? What's up, guys? How's the weekend?
Not too bad.
Same here.
Yeah, it's been so yeah, I'm in it right now, but I'm actually very energized by today because we have a friend and a guy who's been in the biz and really has all the stories for us from within the OG Valiant universe. So when you guys think of the name of the individual that's about to join us today, what comes to mind?
Bloodshot?
Bloodshot. Yeah.
NINJAK, of course.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit, yeah.
So without further ado, we will introduce to you guys Mr. Kevin VanHook himself. What's up, Kevin?
Hey, how you doing? Good to be here.
So welcome to Valiant TLDR, and folks who are tuning in, feel free to chime in. We always take audience questions, and the more the merrier. So Kevin, how are you? Where are you dialing in from?
I'm in northern LA County, so I'm about an hour north of Burbank now. So I moved out to the desert.
All right. So for those of folks who's watching today and may not be familiar with your work, would you mind giving a short introduction into kind of your world and the Valiant universe you were part of?
Sure. So I'll do my best. So I started off writing and drawing comics, worked a lot in independent comics in the 80s. So I had a tendency to work for comic book companies that would go away. So I worked for Pacific when I was 17. And then I worked for Eclipse. And I did, these companies would not end up not releasing the things that I was a part of. Oh, and then I did a bunch of black and white stuff for Amazing Comics, which was the people that did X Mutants. And that's where I did my Jack Frost comics. I helped start Innovation, and I was the original first employee of Caliber Press, and did the Rocky Horror Picture Show movie adaptation. I wrote and drew that. I did a book called Neustralia with Tim Truman and Steve Sullivan at Innovation. I was the art director and production manager of those companies. And then in 1992, in the spring, I joined Valiant, and Jim Shooter was still there, and he and I overlapped for about 3 months. And then working together with me, starting to co-write some things. And then when he left the company, I ended up inheriting those books and then creating Bloodshot along with Don Perlin and Bob. And co-creating NINJAK, wrote his first 2 appearances in Bloodshot, without costume and then with costume. And nice. Then continued to write Eternal Warrior and Solar Man of the Atom quite a bit regularly. And then I would jump in and kind of help when things would get behind. And so every now and then I would write an issue of something that wasn't planned. I wasn't originally going to write those 2 issues of NINJAK that I scripted that came later. But I did, I started off as the production manager and then became an editor, then the executive editor. And that was largely what I did. And then for like 3 years, I continued to do all that kind of stuff.
Hey, kitty cat. And for those who aren't familiar with what a publisher does, like how would you describe the role of a production manager, and especially during the time you were Valiant?
So and just so you'll know, we have 2 street cats who we have inherited, who have adopted us, and so we feed them, and that was one of them. Nice. If you see the black one running around, he's actually out. But production manager basically at the time. So to put this in perspective, everything was hand drawn. It was all hand lettered. In our case, it was all hand colored initially, and so we had a small production department that would take the artwork, photocopy it onto clean it up, meaning erase pencil lines, finish missing border lines, and that sort of thing. And then lettering was done pasted up onto an acetate overlay of the printed size of comics. Comic books typically were drawn on 11 by 17 art paper, Bristol board, and then reduced down to printed size, which is like a 6 by 9 image area from a 10 by 15 image area. And we used a high-end copier that would copy onto a watercolor paper, and then we would essentially glue that to a cardstock, and that's what our coloring was done on. And it was done with Dr. Martin dyes, and then the production department would also then take these pieces of acetate, take rubber cement, the lettering on top of that onto acetate overlays, and then we would get them color separated by a company that's their job was to turn that into 4-color film. And Valiant was the first place I was ever involved in that did this. We actually would retouch the negatives. So we would clean up, because if an artist used bleach to remove color and then paint over it, if it was something supposed to be white, it would actually show up as yellow in the color separations. And so we would actually go in and remove that, opaque that out on the negative. So the negatives are what are then turned into printing plates and so on. But
So as you're describing, I realized I should kind of premiere this little color guide that I picked up, because as you're talking, I didn't really realize like what all these things were, and you're literally describing them. So like that's kind of cool, like all these layers.
And the difference is what Marvel and DC did, where they would color things and you see all these little numbers and letters, all of it. Those are color guides. This is actually the original art that the book is scanned and printed from.
Oh,
So
wow.
these are not color guides; they're actually the colored art. So what we would do that coloring, if you lift up the acetate overlay,
Okay. And it's funny because sometimes some of these words bubbles would fall off. So.
sure, because it was just plain old rubber cement,
Yeah.
and we didn't take it as seriously as we should have, as far as using archival materials and so forth.
And did you guys print from here? Like, what happens? This goes on a copy machine kind of thing? Or?
No. This would then go to a company out on Long Island near Babylon, very, very, very close to the Amityville Horror House.
Okay.
That was called Touch of Class, and Touch of Class would take that, and there was a specific guy that would take this, remove that acetate overlay, and wrap that colored artwork around an acrylic drum, and then a laser would scan that, and it would spin at really high speed.
What?
With this, and that's
So you put all these together? Like, you're the one who actually put all these pieces together, and you take it there.
I had a team, but yeah,
wow.
three people, but yeah. Initially, when I was production manager, but yeah, and I would take stuff straight out to Touch of Class to get them color separated. There's a story, I guess a lot of people don't know. So I wrote and drew Bloodshot 0, and I had hired.
Of course, we're ready for that one, real quick.
Well, it's related to this. So I had hired a friend of mine, very talented artist, graphic artist, very skilled, that I had gone to high school with, and he came out to New York and worked with me. And like in week 2, his job was to take the train and take all these colored pages from Bloodshot 0 to Touch of Class to get them color separated. These what looked a lot like these. And he got off the train. It was a new experience, and he forgot the envelope.
Oh no!
We forgot the what?
The envelope full of the artwork.
What the hell? Where did he put it?
It was left on the train. It was lost.
Yeah.
And
What the heck?
you got to realize this is just before cell phones.
Gosh.
And he
Yeah.
called me up to say, Kevin, I screwed up. I left the package on the train. I said, you're screwing with me, right? He's like, no, because it gets color separated. The negatives come back like a day or 2 later, and then it gets overnighted to Montreal to be printed. And he called me up, and so I had to put a team of people together to recolor this book.
Oh no! So you lost the original art, or is it separate? Different
Original colors.
Oh, just the color. Yeah.
And so we had to. This was all recolored within like 2 days. So,
Wow.
and yeah, he still feels bad about it to this day. But yeah, it was just one of those things. It's just a very human mistake, but bad timing. But
Yeah.
but Jade Mady, who's the primary colorist, he did all that. He did almost everything, even in both versions, and then we just had people kind of helping him out with some backgrounds and stuff to whatever they could take over to just kind of help.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what we would do. We would do those scans, and so the only thing that really changed while I was there in the offices, because I helped develop the digital coloring technique where we went completely digitally in like late '94. But at that stage, the only thing that changed was we found the same guy who had lost the package had experience having worked a lot with Kinko's, and they had a machine called a graphics zoomer, and that was just a really powerful copying machine. It could copy on almost anything. It could copy oversized. It could do magic tricks, and it was used a lot to create blueprints and schematics. And it actually did a little bit better job of the fidelity of preserving our artwork, and it allowed us to do, like a gatefold, like not just a double page spread, but a third page that would fold out. Because we could do great big massive pieces of artwork and reproduce it at a huge piece of glass. So I always told him that was his redeeming feature, was he found us the zoomer.
So I had a pretty important question and pertain to this specific 2 pages here. Was Princess Leia in her costume with Jabba the Hutt an influence or a reference in these panels with Eternal Warrior? Because it really reminded me of her.
That does make you feel that. Yeah, I can see that. No, there was in the late '80s, early '90s, there was a series of magazines put out in Italy that were called fumetti, which is like smoke balloons. And fumetti. Fumetti. And that's a kind of thing. But what I'm talking, so if you want to do a search, look for Photo Romance Darling.
Those are the ones where they kind of made the comics out of photographs, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So you see these things. Now add the word Bruno to your list, your search. BRUNO.
Okay.
And it's not showing him. There's a guy. Do a show more images. Let me just see something here real quick.
Images. Okay.
All right. So click on the very first one.
This one. Okay.
See if you can get the image bigger.
So this was like what, comics, but they used photos?
Yeah, they didn't draw it. They just used photos and put
That's pretty funny.
on it.
What it was is they were soap operas that were shot on film. They were fake frames. That's Bloodshot. Bruno Minetti. So that's
what?
That's Bloodshot. Now go back and look at my page.
That is awesome, dude.
So it's
Oh, yeah.
go to it's clearer later. You have the whole issue there.
Yeah, we have the whole issue.
Yeah, so you can see him there a little bit.
Oh, there we go. That's hilarious.
And then now, of course, because I didn't want it to just look just like that guy, I didn't tell Dick Giordano that I'm using somebody for inspiration.
That's
so
pretty funny.
But if you keep going, there's a page where Bloodshot is is on a dock, I think, and we see the girl. It's got to be before this.
Nope.
His Bloodshot 0. But there's a page. That's it on the left. So
Here. Okay.
So you can. I feel that the bottom panel really looks like the guy. So,
That's pretty funny.
yeah. So, but these were fumetti. So, if you ever heard of the artist Dan Atkins, Dan inked Silver Surfer over Buscema and did many things. He was Wally Wood's assistant. Brilliant guy, funny little guy, but he he wanted nothing better than to just mess with his hi-fi system and not actually draw for a living. And I got him out of semi-retirement by promising him work, and he inked me on a project. But he's the one that turned me onto these fumetti as used as reference. So the page you were asking about with the girl, that's that same bit of reference was used by Paul Galassi in one of the Dark Knight Legends or whatever that miniseries was that came out around 1991 or two. So, but
So it's the same girl.
He used the same girl with the same earrings.
So cool.
But
thanks for answering that very important question.
yes.
I'm just curious.
But looking at it, you can see that I was heavily influenced by Barry Windsor Smith, who I was working with at the time, as far as the Eternal Warriors look and feel.
So as I look at these, why? Okay, so I'm gonna go through it. I'm gonna jump real quick ahead. Why was some of these bigger than others? Like this one, for example, is really big, while the other ones were small.
Well, that's a full-page bleed. We didn't often do full-page bleeds, so that's why probably. But there's just extra paper there. So Maurice Fontenot more than likely colored that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Maurice.
Yeah, Maurice. Yeah.
And so Maurice had wanted to have a little bit more room to paint.
Oh shoot! Look at this. These things are all falling off. See?
Yeah,
falling off the speech.
I regret that. I have, my wife was one of the Valiant colorists, so you'll see Carol VanHook listed. And
Oh my gosh.
and it's she and I went through and used more modern glues to kind of preserve some of her stuff. But yeah, it's a shame.
Should I glue them back on? Like, what should I use?
I just ended up finding a glue stick, just like
Okay.
that. And that's
You use the archival stuff.
well, the glue sticks I'm talking about are archival.
Yeah.
But yeah, the rubber cement that we used at the time was not. We had an artist named Andrew Wendell who gave us a lot of crap for it, and to be perfectly candid, I thought, it's like, you're nuts. This will be fine. Like, I didn't think about it being fine 30 some years later. So.
Right. Yeah. So Carl, if you're going to re-glue those, get a glue stick that says archival.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll hit you up about that separately. But what so the way I don't even know how to present these. Like, how do you guys store these things? Kevin, were these meant to be thrown away?
No, we never treated it as that. But we also didn't really think of it as being too highly collectible. I mean, you've got some great pieces there. But if you'll look, because we have that white paper on top,
Yes.
they're protected. That looks pretty much the same as I remember it looking 30 some years ago. The colors have not faded. So those are Dr. Martin dyes, and Dr. Martin watercolor dyes, and we used airbrushes and things. And more than likely, if you were to look really, really close somewhere in the word balloons, you'll see that bleach has been used to sort of remove a little bit of that color where somebody painted over it. Because if you're coloring a background with an airbrush or even a regular watercolor brush, you don't want your brush to just kind of keep stopping as you get to a word balloon. You want to be able to do a continuous stroke.
Wow.
And so that they would do that and then go back in with bleach and remove the excess color.
That's pretty cool. Okay, this is kind of a cool way to hear about what a production manager does. That was not the intention, Kevin, but this has been sitting in my drawer for a bit, so it's kind of cool as you're describing. Oh man, you're kind of describing what's in my drawer right now.
Awesome. It's great to see him. I mean, it's all of our colorists were really good, but Maurice was particularly talented at this stuff, and Mike Cavallero and Mark Cesar and Paul Audio, all these guys that I worked with were really, really good. And each had their own thing. Mark Cesar was known for his skies. And when my wife and I moved to California, it was the first time, we're almost in the exact same time, we turned to each other and said, "That's Mark's sky." And it was San Diego had these beautiful skies. And
awesome.
Really vibrant pinks and magentas and yellows and stuff at sunset. And then Paul Audio was really particularly good at doing smoke and explosions and stuff. So his nickname was Smokey.
Marcus said glue sticks are acid free. Is that true?
I think they make acid free ones. I can't sort all of them out.
Okay. Yeah. And then Tom said Jason is drooling. Is that true?
Yes. You can see it.
All right. So okay. So we got coverage on the whole, production manager role. Newell, Jason, where do we take it from here?
Well, one of the things, because Kevin, how old were you when you started at Valiant?
26.
Good question.
So you're relatively young compared to some of the giants you were working with. I mean, you're talking about Dick Giordano, Barry Windsor Smith, Don Perlin. I mean,
Probably.
was it intimidating? I mean, did they take you under their wing? I mean, how was that working relationship?
I was born old, so I didn't really think of it that way. It was interesting, and I'd also been in the business for 9 years, so it was. I had been around the block a bit. I understood. I at that point I'd already done every task you can do in making comics, including shooting my own negatives and making my own printing plates.
Nice.
So, because I had helped set up printers to print comics. So when we did Rocky Horror Picture Show at Caliber Press, I took a regular local printer and turned them into a comic book printer, and they printed thousands of comics.
Wow.
In Wheeling, West Virginia. I helped them get a deal with the Chamber of Commerce to be able to get some support on that. But innovation was in Wheeling.
Yeah, how old was everyone at this point? You were 26, but it was like
They were almost all 40, 42, 43 in that range, as far as people that you're talking about.
Oh, kind of like our age. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, Bob was 12 years older than me.
Okay.
And so I was born in 65 and he was born in 53. And so it's and end of 94, we had his 40th birthday party. And Don turned 63 around the same time, both in September. So, but yeah, I used to joke that when Don and I first started working on Bloodshot, our ages were palindromes. I was 26 and he was 62.
Okay.
But yeah, it was. They treated me with respect. Shooter treated me with respect. They, he actually did legitimately want to hear my opinion about things. He didn't always agree with them, but he would. And Barry was just a sweetheart. I still think the world of Barry. Barry is the reason I drew Bloodshot Zero. I was showing some artwork to Paul Audio and Jorge Gonzalez, two of the guys there, and Barry walked behind and says, like, "Whose drawing is this?" And Paul said, "Kevin's." "Kevin, why aren't you drawing one of these bloody books?" Because I'm Bob. So I said, Bob, and he said, "Kev can draw anything he wants. He knows that." It's like, I didn't know that. Can I do
No pressure.
You want to do the origin of Bloodshot? You want to just do Bloodshot Zero? I said, well, that would give me time because then I could do it over the course of a year while I'm doing all this stuff. And that's what we did.
You did it on the side, like a side gig while you were working there. Oh, wow.
I was the executive editor, writing an average of 5 comic books a month and the Flash Gordon Sunday comic strip at this
Oh, wow.
with 3 to 5 year old twins.
Wow. Peace.
But I also had been, I was, it's that thing they say about, luck and opportunity meeting preparedness. I was ready because I had spent so much time like, okay, and I've got my book done and it's ready to come out. And then, Pacific filed bankruptcy and I'm not going to get paid.
Well, that's interesting that you have, high praise for Barry Windsor Smith or because JJ, when we had her on the show, basically said the same thing. And like, if you read articles online, which, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's right. Mm-hmm. And everybody's got their good and bad days. But, he's labeled as somebody that was very hard to get along with.
Not at all.
Whereas like you just had high praise as well as JJ did as well. So
no, Barry was a really sweet guy. He might have been hard to get along with for Bob and Jim. Get along with for the artists in general. Mike Leake would never have drawn Exo Man of War without Barry going over his layouts and giving him advice and all that kind of stuff.
I like Mike's work on Exo.
Oh, Mike's great. Yeah, it's Mike is somebody, and I think I can say it's 30-some years later. They had trouble with deadlines, and he would get very anxious and anxiety ridden over some of the stuff, and I felt a large part of my role because I became the executive editor. I wasn't just a production manager. I didn't realize it at the time. I was kind of acting in an editorial capacity after I'd been there for a little bit anyway, to just kind of help. And so once I was actually editing, part of what I am good at is scheduling and breaking down tasks and stuff, and just working with him to just say, okay, well, how long does it take you really to lay out a page? Well, like an hour or two just to do thumbnails. And so, well, then you could lay out a book in a week. So let's just, but I don't need you to lay out a book in a week. I need you to give me 4 pages tomorrow. And then we did that, and we just kind of said, and I said, you hit the 4 pages, stop. It's okay. And next thing we know, we had all of an issue of EXO laid out in thumbnails, and now it was just a matter of him blowing them up on a copier and doing, what we call breakdowns, where it's the line art without shading. And then Tom Ryder, who was an artist in his own right and had studied very closely with Bob in terms of inking, was able to then take that and add the shading, EXO's metallic rendering that was kind of influenced by Iron Man. But it was an interesting experience to do. But as far as Barry goes, Barry was wonderful to work with. For a very, very brief period, I shared an office with him after Jim left, because Barry tended to only come in like once or twice a week, and so they needed to stick me somewhere. What happened was I was big on saying, it's like, I'm not going to write on the clock because I don't want anybody saying that I'm double dipping or anything like that. I'll write the books at home, be the executive editor here or the production manager. And then they came to me and said that because of the progression of things that happened after Jim left, they really wanted me to get a book written like now. And so they said, we'll stick you in an office and so you can think. And so I ended up in Barry's office, and then Barry would come in twice a week and sit at the art table beside me. I'm at a regular desk.
It's cool.
On the laptop. Well,
Dang, so cool.
My favorite Barry things was, and we had a star on the outside of his office, literally taped on the outside of the door.
Why a star?
He was a superstar. So.
Wow.
Superstar.
So, Kevin, is it true? Marcus said there was an interviewer who had problems with BWS. Is that true?
I wouldn't be surprised. I never knew of anything. I never found him difficult. The closest he got to being harsh with me was he's drawing, and he's actually scripting the opening, the bit where he said, "I had a dream that I was falling through time. I'm falling still in the eternal void." And he was writing something around that little bit, and I asked a question, and he was like, "Shh, I had a thought," and I'm like, "Go ahead." And then he said, and the only other time it was along those lines that I thought was funny, we were sitting there and he's drawing, and it's Unity, so it's a big shot of Solar with energy. If you see the finished drawing, there's energy floating all over Solar's body, big splash page. And the reason that is he said, for some inexplicable reason, I've completely forgotten how to draw the human torso. And so energy all over it. And obviously he hadn't, but he just didn't like what he was coming up with, and he did that.
Man.
Well, along those same lines, we were talking about Bloodshot.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Let me move Jason over here.
From the Secret to the Valiant Universe.
Yes.
Stories.
So good. Yeah. Do you remember those, Kevin? Do you remember?
I do.
So yeah, that was a fun recent pickup.
If we actually did like had a police officer go to Jason's house and like dust them for fingerprints, do you think your fingerprints will be on them?
Yes. No, I saw every single piece of artwork unless I was sick or something. And the thing is I consider my initials to be KJV, Kevin Joseph VanHook, or KV is how I often sign out. So if you ever see a page that says KVH as the initials on it, somebody, see, that's I signed off on that. If you see somebody wrote KVH, they were forging my signature.
That's cool. Oh, so it's KV always. So it's not KVH.
Yeah, I never used it.
This is.
Hey, I recognize that page.
Yeah.
Oh wow, Agu said blacklight. I thought it, but I didn't say it. So Kevin, Lee Harmon says, "Great to see you here, Kevin."
Oh, that's great. Lee's one of my oldest and dearest friends. So when I worked as a graphic artist in Indiana, he and I developed the Jack Frost comic together, and he lettered it. I just thought he had the most beautiful handwriting, and he lettered that, and ended up lettering quite a few comic books.
You're right, Agu. I think everyone did.
Yeah. And Kevin, I don't know if you remember this or not, but Brian Wells?
Yep.
Yeah, so Brian had actually told me to DM you, and like a few years ago, you had done this for me. And I had sent this to you in the mail blank, and you had signed a couple of my comics and sent it back to me.
I do.
Wait, what is that?
This is
cover.
Yeah, it's a sketch cover, but it's a Hulk 181 homage with.
I know, it's so cool.
Eternal Warrior and Archer and Armstrong. Anyway,
Sick. It's so sick.
That's pretty cool.
That's very
cool. That's super cool.
Yeah, I enjoy doing that kind of thing from time. I don't end up doing them a lot. If I go to a convention, I do a lot of sketching. And I had a 6 years ago now, Bob and I did a convention outside Chicago, in an area called Orland Park, and they had they got hit with a winter blizzard in April, and so their attendance was really low. But I still ended up doing quite a bit of sketching. So did Bob. But I did several Rise Zeros where in that red circle I would put Bloodshot in the circle behind the silhouette of Bloodshot. So that's
nice. Cool. So can we do some time traveling, Kevin?
Sure.
Bloodshot. Here we go. Where were you? What were you thinking about? Like, where was your head at? What was your life like leading up to this whole thing and all coming together?
You got to realize how incredibly quickly this happened, because it went from me arriving late March, like the 28th of March, to actually work with the company. So what had happened was, got laid off at a typesetting graphic arts company, and my wife and I were doing okay financially as far as paying off bills and whatnot. And I said, give me 2 weeks to do some samples, and and if I don't get anything, I'll go get a real job. It's fine. And I sent stuff off to Marvel and sent stuff off to different places. But Valiant, I picked up an issue of Turok, of Magnus 12 with Turok, to get their address, and I felt guilty if I didn't buy the book just to copy down their address. So I bought their book, and then I sent off my samples, and I called the office, and Jim Shooter answered. And he was very polite, but he was also explaining that they get thousands of samples in a week, and there's no way he could possibly find mine. And I said, well, mine are in a 9x12 black envelope. And he's like, well, I've got a 9x12 black envelope right here on my desk. Hang on. Yeah, it's you. Oh, you're pretty good. A little flashier than I like, but you're pretty good. And so I said, well, he wasn't going to give me any job. And I said, if you ever need anybody that's got a strong background in print production, design, graphic design, and printing, I'm a Mac guy. That's what I do. And he said, well, let me put you on with my buddy Bob. And Leighton got on the phone, and he said, can you get over here for an interview? I said, I'm in Indianapolis. And he said, hey, I'm from Indianapolis. I said, I know, you're a legend around here. And basically the bottom line is, they said if I could get myself out there and I could do everything I said I could do, they would hire me. And I said, well, make room for my desk, because of the first time in my life, I'm not bluffing. I went out for an interview, got hired. 2 weeks later, they moved my wife and kids and me to Jersey City and started working there. So 3 months later, actually like 2 months and 2 weeks or something like that, Jim was let go from the company. Jim and JJ and
fast, everything.
Very fast. And I had already been starting to co-write Eternal Warrior, although Jim was rewriting everything, but he was liking what I was doing. It's just he had his own ideas. And Solar. And so Jim left, and Mazarski and Bob came to me and said, do you want to take a shot at this? And I said, yeah. And so I said, I don't want to, I said, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to make Jim feel like I was being opportunistic or anything like that. So I said, if you don't mind, I'd like to call him and see how he feels about me doing it. And I called him that night. He said, Kevin, you're a smart guy. I was going to give you writing work anyway. Go with God. And that was the last time we spoke for 30 years, but until 2 years ago. But I started writing those books. So then I have a strong printing background, and I understood how chromium was made. And so I went out to press check that cover way early And so I wrote Bloodshot 1 largely on a beach in San Diego
Nice.
on a yellow pad.
Man, what a life! You're like way ahead of the times when it comes to working remote.
Yeah, I was waiting around for this because this was such a unique process. They kept having trouble with it delaminating, meaning the plastic was coming away from the cardstock. And so I was there for like 9 days or something, and every day I was checking in with the printer. So this process, Chromium, was developed by a company called Signs and Glassworks, and they were famous for making Budweiser signs and Miller beer signs, mirrors that you would see at the county fair and stuff, printing on glass and printing on mirrored surfaces. And they had developed this for a little company called Comic Images that did trading cards, and they came in and showed this to us.
Oh, it was a trading card thing.
It was a trading card thing, and just very specialty cards for Comic Images. Hank and George, these two guys who had, and I always get it backwards, but they either invented Underoos or Garanimals. I think it's Underoos, but they that has to be because it was the superhero stuff. And they were really nice guys, and they introduced the salespeople from Signs and Glassworks to us, and we made on the spot a 6-month exclusive deal, and
nice.
So we could be the only people in comics doing it, and we did that. And then we had to figure out how to get Bloodshot done, and so we had that cover drawn.
Yeah, when did you draw this? So when you said you landed in March, so when did Barry draw it, and when did you have the art to be able to go take it to?
We drew it in July.
So you drew in July, and then you were on the beach.
I'm in San Diego in August.
In August, okay, and then let's see, February. So then you guys were solicitors.
Well,
so okay, so.
Yes,
what's up with this sticker thing? Like, what happened here? Like, because later on, you guys did the, Bloodshot Zero and also like XO and NINJAK and full chromium, but then this and Torok was cut out and like kind of stickered on there.
So this is what we call an applique. So this is glued onto it because when they tried to do full metal coverage edge to edge, which is what we refer to, what you're saying, XO Zero, NINJAK, blah blah blah, those were delaminate. That cover, that piece of plastic. The basic sense of what this is a piece of clear acrylic with sort of a silk screened substance similar to rubber cement that makes that pattern, like to see the dots or the etch that goes around the figure. And then pressed up against a piece of holographic foil. And so in this case, it was a piece of silver foil. And then we allow a certain amount of color to show through. So you see Bloodshot's white skin, that's opaque. So you're not seeing any foil. But you see the equipment and machinery down there below that you're seeing the foil all the way through that. So it's just
oh, that's cool. So this is also blocked off. So it's actually not foil.
It's under it. It's just there's white ink back there. So instead of just being black, yellow, red, and blue, it's plus white. And so then like the dot on his chest doesn't have the white, so that's metallic looking. And it's if you ever feel a cover to like this stuff. You can't feel the bumps or the etch or the lines or any of the patterns or anything like that because it's actually on the other side of that plastic pressed into the foil. If you ever look at like one of those full metal coverage edge to edge comics we talked about, if you open up the book, you can see that pattern. You can see all that etching.
On the back, I remember.
It's backed up against cardstock.
Yeah.
And so it's glued to it. So this was the way we had to do it. So you comment on the fact it's February. It's cover dated that, but that's because comics back then were dated 3 to 4 months in advance.
Of course.
Because it was to tell you when you could take it off the stands. It's been on there long enough, whatever. So this came out November 17th. So it's some people want to argue with me, but it was November 17th. So
wow, this came out November 17th. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I should always rewind 3 months.
It's 3 to 4 months depending on where in the month it fell, but it's the same day that Superman died. So,
oh wow!
And you may have heard me tell this personally, but the day Bloodshot 1 came out, Forbidden Planet in Manhattan had 2 lines around the block, one to buy Superman and one to buy Bloodshot.
Huh.
And then 2 weeks later, I went in to see how it was selling, didn't tell him who I was. And the guy said, oh, yeah, I heard like Valiant had like a big fire at their printing company or whatever. And so we can't get reorders. I'm like, really? I would have thought they would have told me. Why? I'm the production manager of the company. And I deal with that printer all the time. I have to make a phone call. So, just for whatever reason, the guy was just making up a lie to explain why they couldn't get reordered. And it was insane. I mean, the book, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks after it came out, Midtown Comics had it for like $75.
Marcus Way is a Barbenheimer effect. That's true.
That's funny.
Who was Barbie though?
Yeah. I'm going to go with Vera Oppenheimer.
Yeah, actually, it would be right. Yeah, because Superman would be the tights.
Yeah. Hadn't done it that way. But yeah.
All right, let's talk about the book itself. Like, any major memories? I mean, it's pretty violent, man. Like, we had a review on this, and we were saying how, like, man, like they're shooting through the head. Like, this guy blasts this guy on the neck. He's jumping through it. He shoots this guy here and like blasts him through here. Like, did you write it that way? Did you say Bloodshot blast this guy's head off?
Yeah,
like,
I said blows his brains out on page.
Oh, really?
But yeah, so
Literally.
Don came to me and he showed me something, and it was tamed down from what you're seeing. And he said, "You think Bob's going to let me do this?" And I said, "Bob said we could like push the boundaries on this one. You want me more?" I said,
It is your fault.
Yeah.
I think you should have brain matter." So he pushed it.
Nice.
And you got to realize that this is at the time a 62-year-old guy, and as a 26-year-old, I thought that was really old. As I'm getting closer and closer to that, I don't think of it as old as it was. But he was having fun. He was having the time of his life because
Wait, how old was Don?
62.
He was 62 when he was drawing this?
Yep.
What?
So you gotta imagine. So when this book came out, and he came into my office and said that his local comic shop wants us to do a signing. It's a paid signing. So they're going to pay us $500 a piece to go sign in Brooklyn. I'm like, they don't have to pay me, Don. If it's your comic shop, I'll go out there and sign. They're going to pay us $500 a piece for you and me to sign in Brooklyn. And I'm like, okay. So we went out there. But the idea that this guy who had been a wonderfully experienced craftsman for his entire career, but never really had that fan following. You had people that loved Transformers or that loved what he did on Defenders or whatever, but it was not like this. And suddenly, we're sitting there doing signings in Vegas and Texas and all these places, and it's 100 people with stacks of books, or 500 people. And it just
Nice.
it sounds like I'm somehow being self-deprecating or something, but I really was more excited for him than I was even for myself, just because I could see how much that meant to him. And we lost Don a year ago, by the way.
Mm.
So so he lived into his mid-90s.
Wow. Was he still active in the 90s or?
The last 4 or 5 years, he wasn't doing much, but I would occasionally get a sketch. Somebody would ask me to like do a bookend, like Don had just done a sketch of Bloodshot, and they wanted me to do the same kind of thing, but like facing the other way or something. So he was still doing stuff, but at least till then. But one of the last times I spoke to him, actually on the phone, he would, because I would call every now and then to check in on him. He said that he was more like Bloodshot than he'd ever been because he was mostly mechanics.
Oh man. So how much was Bloodshot inspired by Weapon X in kind of the way he runs around naked shooting everyone or killing everyone? Yeah.
If it was subconscious. In all honesty, I wouldn't have thought. I don't think I thought of that. Somebody else asked me recently about Deadpool. I have to honestly say I don't think I knew who Deadpool was when I did this.
Yeah, I don't see any similar to Deadpool, but he definitely Weapon X. She's in a lab, except instead of being super hairy, he's super naked and smooth.
Right, this is true.
Well, what year did this one come out again? Number one?
It came out November 17th, 1992.
92. Yeah, I don't know if Deadpool was even around yet, or was very close to that when he would have first appeared, right?
It must be around the time. Somebody was saying, it's like, it's
yeah.
Well, I've had when they started making noises about the movie. By the way, real quick, that's John Hartz, our head of marketing. That's who Malcolm was visually based on.
Wait, which one?
The gray-haired guy.
Gray-haired, this guy.
Bloodshot's talking to.
That's funny. That's so fun. So, did you guys just reference everyone in the office when you guys drew?
Yeah, go to the last page of the book.
Okay. Last page of the book. Okay, here we are.
So the guy on the left there, middle panel, that's in the orange robe or whatever.
Yeah.
That's done. So,
Oh wow.
That's Don Perlin?
yeah, he did a portrait for.
Hey, that's cool.
He said, "I want to be the guy in power, so I'm going to get Canelo."
How about this guy? Is this Bob Layton?
No, those are the rest of it. They're pretty generic, I think. But but that guy and John Hart's were specifically. And then I told you that when I drew Bloodshot Zero, who I used as a model.
Right.
Yeah.
But Don didn't, and Don didn't typically use photo reference for anything. He drew very well out of his head. And, but yeah, so that was just kind of a fun thing to do.
Kevin, we got a question from an audience. Impressive Comics. Did Kevin like the Bloodshot movie? Did he meet Vin Diesel?
I did meet Vin Diesel,
Oh, man.
and I got to spend some time with him, and I have pictures of him and me and Dinesh and Bob, and yeah. So, but it was an interesting thing. It was great. Dinesh was kind enough to fly Bob and me to South Africa to be on set.
Oh wow.
Yeah, we're gonna have a Dinesh on this when we get to the VEI segment of this whole Valiant world. So I do have another question. When it comes to references, I feel like back then, I hear about all the comic book guys, making money, rocking out like rock stars. But then there's also a lot of reference of like shady hotel rooms and stuff that like, Bloodshot checks into. So where did those references come from? Were they like real life inspired as, kids in New York?
So one of the most famous shady hotels in New York is the Carter Hotel, or the Hotel Carter. It's right off Times Square, and it's the one that's most famous for a dead hooker in the mattress. And I would walk by it on my way to Valiant when I would when I would take the shuttle bus or whatever in from Jersey City.
Wow.
And so I asked around. I had even said, this place looks really, really seedy. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's horrible. And so that was kind of the thinking for that. But we put him in a nice hotel when we had Bloodshot's day off. Yeah, there it is.
Oh wow.
Hotel Carter. That's pretty funny.
And it's in the books. There's actually visual. Don used it as it exists.
As a reference.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
I think Carl just imagined all of the people working at Valiant going and renting rooms by the hour.
Yeah, I did actually.
Those girls had their own apartments.
They went for the high end stuff.
Yeah,
The royalty checks were big, like adult Americans filthiest.
I told you. So yeah, it's yeah. But
That's pretty funny.
there were different royalty levels, and so early on, when we established royalties, good or bad, Mazarsky wanted to do different tiers. If you were from the outside, you were a tier of royalty. If you were somebody who also was one of our own, like me, you were given a different royalty that was considered homegrown talent, and it was like a third of their other royalties. So
Wait, what? So they would reward people from the outside and dock you guys?
He felt that people like myself or Moretti or Maurice or Jorge or somebody that was on that would also do another job with the company, that we had an inside advantage.
Got it, like the whole salary thing. So you only were able to buy a Ferrari, not a house.
I didn't make nearly what people would have thought for selling a million copy comic book. Don did well. But people like Bernard, who was not considered homegrown, he did half of an issue of Turok 2 and made a substantial check. So.
Wait, Turok 2 sold a lot of copies too?
Yeah. I mean, we came off of 1.7 million on Turok 1, and I don't remember for a fact, but typically your numbers are a little over half. So I would think that we probably did somewhere close to 900,000 on issue 2.
Oh wow, so kind of similar as like Ride in the Future Force #9, which was around 900K as well.
Yes.
Okay.
And that would have been Sean, who was also not considered an in-house talent. We brought him and Bernard in almost at the same time. I think they were. I don't know if they were both at San Diego Con. I didn't go San Diego Con of '93 because I was in San Diego half of that previous year.
Who did you like better, Bernard or Sean?
I think the world of both of them. Yeah. Sean and I did Bloodshot together, and then worked with you years later, and then Bernard and I did The Visitor together.
Oh, cool! That's awesome. Is it true that like that's actually interesting because when we talked to Sean and when I talked to Bernard, obviously it's very public, and even Bob said this that like Bernard was like his son, right? And then Sean was kind of under Barry Windsor Smith. So like, did you kind of observe that from a third party perspective on what that was like? Were they kind of like?
In all honesty, I didn't see it. I knew that Bob thought very highly of Bernard. I think he liked Sean too, but I know that Bernard was much younger. Bernard was like 19 or 20, and Sean is like closer to my age, so he's like 26, maybe 25. And a lot of us were like 25, 26 years old. Jorge, Maurice, a lot of the colors, because they had all gone to Kubert School and they were in the same class, and that's how we got them. But Bernard and Yvel Guichet were both like 19 or 20 when they started with us. So I think Bob was just so impressed with how much skill he had so young. And, he wanted to create Dr. Mirage. He wanted to create something for Bernard to draw. But they were all, Sean had this incredible, more architectural type background in terms of, he was very technically oriented. And I don't know how he feels when I tell this story, but I did a 2-issue miniseries with Brian Hitch called Visitor versus the Valiant Universe. And I was really, really proud of it and still am. But towards the end of it, Brian didn't care for how the inks were looking. And it was Dick Giordano and Dick's assistant, Pat. He didn't like Browns, which was Pat. And he said, I just don't want to do the last 6 pages or something like that of the second issue. And so Sean came in and drew those 6 pages. And I don't remember if there were thumbnail sketch layouts or what, but yeah, there had to have been thumbnails because Sean took that. And after he had done that, and after he had kind of done a book where he's kind of looking and walking in Brian's footsteps, his stuff exploded in terms of visual dynamicism. So he went from almost always being very kind of profile lateral to things coming straight at camera. And so you look at something like Bloodshot, where we introduced Rampage, and you've got this big, massive, muscular character, and extreme foreshortening. That wasn't something he would have done naturally, I don't think, before.
Okay, so a lot about Bloodshot. Like, can we pivot into your other creation, Mr. NINJAK himself?
Well, and like I said, it's a co-creation. Bob came up with the idea. Bob came back from a vacation and said, I want to do this thing about a hijacker, but he's a ninja, and I want to call him a ninja.
Yeah, so why NINJAK?
Because it's a hijacker who's a ninja.
Right.
Oh my god!
And,
that's what we call portmanteau, Carl.
Yeah, and that's what I told him. I said, so that's what you got.
So why Bloodshot? Why Bloodshot? Like name wise?
Well, because we wanted to introduce this character soon. So I had created a character called the Weaponeer. The Weaponeer was going to be this international gun smuggler guy. And Bob said, why couldn't he be the Weaponeer? Why couldn't he be pulling the strings from behind the scenes? And so I named him Colin King, which was taking two of my favorite horror authors. So Colin wrote Planet of the Vampires that became Life Force, the movie, if you ever saw that.
I love Life Force.
I do. I love Matilda May.
Never seen it. Never seen Life Force.
Well, I think you would at least like parts of it.
Yeah. Imagine Patrick Stewart becoming a hot naked chick with very nice chest.
Huh?
Space vampires, and yeah, it's weird, but it's fun.
Imagine.
It's very weird. It's directed by Toby Hooper, who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Poltergeist. Yep. Just a wonderful film. But anyway, I named him Colin King, and then Bob and I started kicking around, do we want him, what we wanted to be like, and he was really pushing, and what I did was have him similar to a Bruce Wayne kind of character. Wealthy and can do this thing. But so go back one. Sorry.
Okay.
Go back one page. So that's Jennifer. Go forward one now. Same girl.
Go forward.
That's Jennifer Maldonado, who was one of our staffers. That's who she's based on.
How fun!
Yeah, but and she's very she's worked in politics and different things today. So she's very active and very smart lady.
Here we are, Colin King. This is actually his first appearance, yeah?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I didn't know until years after I had written her, you see the woman there, and it's named Jillian Alcott. That's Bob's old girlfriend, Jillian Alcott.
Which one? This one?
Yeah, that woman is named after her. And so years later, I'm introduced to Jillian Alcott, and I looked at Bob like, you never told me I was writing somebody based on a real person, like using their name. He's, oh yeah, I thought I told you. But yeah. But,
That's a way to court, a great tool for courtship. I got you in my comic book.
well, it was when you were no longer an item. That's what, at all. So that was what I thought was interesting. But I love Neville. I love this idea of these two characters. And so we introduced them in Eternal Warrior. So what happened was I'd written like the first 3 or 4 issues of Bloodshot. I had my own ideas of where I would go. And I'm like, I need a mission structure. I need something that causes me to take this character around the world and do something. And I was talking to John Ostrander, and John was doing our big Magnus 2-year epic thing, the Malev War. And just while I'm talking to him, I said, you know what? I think it'd be cool if the Eternal Warrior, who that was how they met in the very first appearance, right? In the Eternal Warrior 4. What if the Eternal Warrior recruits him to go work for Newell? And that's how that became that storyline. And
that's why there was like a major pivot going into issue 6, because you went from like this whole mafia story, and then all of a sudden 6 is like this whole kind of airplane hijack, passenger 57 kind of thing going on.
Well, I did a lot of stuff. I was always fascinated by airplanes and how they know where they are in space and stuff. And it's so telling to talk about the time, because if like a year and a half later, I wrote an issue of Visitor where I was talking about GPS, and my editor, who I won't mention by name right now, said, now it just sounds too much like science fiction. I don't think that there's anything like that. And I'm like, no, honestly, we have satellites pinpoint where you're at on the Earth. That's just, I don't think anybody knows about it. And then, of course, today we carry it in our pocket. But we also, the same editor I had difficulty with, because I wrote an Area 51 story, and he said that that's just, nobody would believe that there's some hidden U.S. air base that deals with it. And about 6 months after that conversation, Montel Williams had an episode where they revealed the truth about Area 51, that it really was a base and it's outside Vegas. Blah, blah, blah. But, so it's always interesting to try to tell stories like that. So Bob had been very influenced by popular science, and so that was influencing the nanite stuff. And then I was doing a lot of research myself on nanites. And I was also trying to create a supporting cast of villains. And so we had Cinder and Ash, which are these two that are in the storyline.
Oh yeah, those two. Yeah.
So trying to come up with more characters that we have. And then I just love the idea that it's coming up, I think, but where Bloodshot gets run through by NINJAK's sword.
Oh yeah.
We had a question about that too. So this was very Rambo. Was there a reason why he put this headband on?
I think it was just Don was probably influenced by Rambo or something like that. I never thought about
Predator right here.
Yeah, Predator would have been more my influence, but I think it's definitely Don's as well. And it's fairly dark. I mean, there's this guy's burning people to a crisp.
Yeah,
it's true. Look at that.
So the inker on this was
White Lotus, season 3. The guy who's at the hotel.
I have to see White Lotus. I haven't seen any of it yet. I've been told it's great. The inker on this stuff is a guy named John Dixon. John was an older guy, probably at this point like 65 or 68. Oh. He had drawn a comic strip in Australia called Airhawks and the Flying Doctors for 28 years.
Oh, wow.
And was just a brilliant artist in his own right, and he was very fast. And so we brought him in. Before I got there, Jim Shooter brought him in. And I ended up being close to him. We were close friends. When I moved to San Diego, I lived like 5 minutes from him. We would get together.
So who thought of the folding sword?
Me. Yeah, I'm pretty confident that would have been me. So that's because I'd always been fascinated by ninjutsu and done a lot of research and stuff. And I was a martial artist when I was young. And so I did a lot of weapons play and stuff. So.
And what's the logic where like he's limping on this crutch, but then he's stabbed by a sword and he kind of just takes it out? So is certain parts of him recover faster than others, or?
Well, he's recovering already from the leg, so so that by this point he's pretty much probably fairly recovered. What I didn't come up with for like another year or two was the idea that he needed raw materials for the nanites to operate off of.
Ooh.
So when Norm Brayfogle and I did a story, we opened up with his leg blown off, and he ends up ripping off the bumper off of a car and wrapping it around his stump, and the nanites use it to regenerate the leg.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I always wanted to. That's how I wanted to open up the movie. That was when I was originally going to do a pitch for a screenplay for it before Dinesh was ever involved. I wanted to with him regenerate. So, just because I thought that was one of the stronger features about the guy. And again, this is long before the masses knew who Deadpool was, or I was getting references. People were asking me when the movie started to come out. They were asking about. Was a Universal Soldier influenced me? And it's like, no, look at the dates. Predated Universal Soldier. Memento, people were saying, it's like, yeah, you're just ripping off Memento. It's like, Memento's like 8 years later or something.
Yeah.
So you recently done a story for the Kickstarter / Alien Books, where you were able to revisit the old look with the new look of Bloodshot. How fun was that to be able to revisit the character? Because I mean, over the course of time, he's kind of evolved as other companies, whether it be Acclaim or then later Dinesh, bought them out. How fun was it to do that story?
I had a blast with it. I had fun. Several times over the years, they would ask me to draw something, and twice this happened where I would have a conversation with somebody at the company, and they would say they want me to draw like Exo the way I know Exo to be. And so I did that for the 50th, whatever it was. There was an issue where there's 50 different Exos on a jam cover.
That's it.
There you are.
Yeah, so this is my take on it. So, but and then I would find out after I drew it that no, they really wanted me to draw the 2012 version. And it's like, I did an Archer and Armstrong cover. It was the same thing. But yeah, that one's somebody else's story. But that first piece was mine. Yeah. And they promised me that they will get me comp copies of this stuff. I haven't seen them yet. So.
I don't know if they have access to it anymore because they're now with IDW.
Yeah, I saw that. No, they were supposed to get me trade paperbacks of the Bloodshot because they've reprinted Bloodshot and NINJAK. Like whether 6 or 8 issues or something like that. There you go.
You got one, right, Jason?
Yeah. This is it right there.
Yeah, that's it.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's whereas Marvel is known for its multiverse and stuff, Valiant's always been like streamlined. Alien's kind of doing something different with that now. But,
yeah, this for me, at some point along the way, we had a conversation where I said, "What do you want me to draw? My Bloodshot or your Bloodshot?" And they said, "Well, could you figure out a way to do both?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'll figure that out."
That's cool.
I had a blast with it. It was. Fortunately, I tend to stay busy. I produce visual effects for movies and television, and I tend to not have a whole lot of time, and so I drew that over the course of like 6 or 7 weeks. But it was fun.
So how long did you stay on board after the Acclaim buyout? Were you all the way through that, or?
So I was on tour for Deathmate. So we did a tour bus our publisher was Steve Mazarski, who was the business manager for Aerosmith and Cyndi Lauper and Charlie Daniels. And so he had access to tour buses. So Aerosmith had an extra tour bus. And so people like me, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Maurice, Joe St. Pierre, took a tour bus, and we toured central Indiana and Illinois, and ending up at Chicago Comic Con. And then Aerosmith came to our booth and signed books and stuff. It was really cool. So nice. I was on tour when I got the call from Bob saying the deal had closed and I was getting a bonus from the Acclaim sale. And it was very cool. And I kind of said then, I said, so what's your opinion? Is this the beginning of the end, or is this the beginning of a new chapter and it's going to be a good thing? He was like, I'm just taking the money, Kev. Okay.
At least it's honest.
Yeah.
What was that tour like? I mean, was it you and all the Image guys as well, or?
Yeah, it was me, Rob, the people I mentioned. Rob and Jim and I were on a bus for 6 days together, and sleeping in medium hotels, not the Hotel Carter. But it was fascinating to watch. They Rob, for all the flack he has gotten and got back then about certain things, it was incredibly cool to watch him ramp himself up when we had when like we're getting closer to a store to do a signing, and whereas the rest of us we're toast. We're all in our mid-20s, but we're just wiped out. It's been a long trip, and this is now our third store or whatever in that day, and we're on a bus traveling hundreds of miles, and you saw Rob just kind of sit up and just kind of like pump himself up and get really excited. And then, we rounded a corner and there's literally like 1,000 people in line to see us and get autographs and stuff. And he helped really kind of bring everybody's energy up. And I thought that was very cool. So, nobody's better than Barry. And I think what he brought to this stuff is great. And of course, Jim Lee's a brilliant guy too.
Oh, yeah.
What was the conversation like when you guys decided that Barry Windsor Smith and Jim Lee was gonna rock out together like this?
It was exciting. I mean, I think we were all excited. I think we all thought it was cool. I mean, it's there's stories and it's partially accurate that Bob went out to kind of put pressure on Rob to draw, or to deliver, because this started. I think behind the scenes, without me knowing it, there was already a conversation. But the way I was informed about this is Mazarski came out into the bullpen and said, "Hey, Kevin, Rob Liefeld sent you a fax." And it said, "Hey, Kev, young blood, bloodshot, this blood's for you. What do you think?"
That's funny.
Could we do it? And he said, "I think we can. Let me see if I can make a deal." My instinct says he'd already made a deal. But he somehow wanted me to kind of sign off on it because of Bloodshot. And that's what started the thing. Unfortunately, Bloodshot Red was the book that was a year late. Or Deathmate Red, which had Bloodshot in it.
Right.
But because of how I handled Supreme, I did a Solar and Supreme story. Rob actually offered me a chance to do a 4-issue miniseries. But I was under contract and had to say no.
Wow, Mark Silvestri. I forgot about this.
Yeah, no, we had some great people.
Oh, what the heck? That's crazy. Union. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, and all the crossovers. Was there? Do you remember that if there was actually like a comprehensible story that was being put together? Or
yeah, because Bob wrote the initial kickoff, and it was very logical. So, and it sort of made sense. It was sort of the next stage of what we've done in Unity, but without the heavy psychology about the mother. And Barry created Master Dark, and so that's just such a wonderful character, both visually and everything else.
Oh wow, Quesada jumped in on this too? I had no idea.
Yeah, because Quesada was one of our guys. He had colored Nintendo comics for Valiant before I got there. He was still hanging around, and he had just done Azrael, and then we got him to do covers for my Solar run, early on issues of my Solar run.
Yeah.
But I knew Joe from Joe Rubenstein because they were friends. And I actually walked. Joe took him up to DC to have him show his stuff, and I happened to be with them when that happened. So,
Woo! Look at this.
Yeah.
Peace.
So-
cool stuff.
Valiant was always known as the innovator. I mean, you think first chromium cover. They were not the first one to do 3D, but what do you remember about Valiant Vision?
Well, a lot, because my wife was the colorist of Valiant Vision, and I had and I'm very proud of that story. Me and Yvel Guichet. So what happened was Mazarski, rock and roll promoter, came back from a concert in Florida with these glasses and said, "I think our comics look pretty cool with these." And we looked at different things, and I realized fairly quickly that it worked on the visible spectrum, and that red came forward and blue receded. And I said, he said, "Do you think we could do comics?" I said, "If you just sold regular comics with them, I think it would drive people nuts and give them a headache. But if we designed a book with a red character like Solar, and we put him in space or something so that the black will always recede, I think we could come up with something pretty cool." And Neil Adams, of all people, fascinating by 3D, was somebody that was really, really into it. He came in and he and I sat together, and he did a colored piece similar to this as a guide for my wife, and then my wife ended up painting it. So,
did your wife color things differently for Valiant Vision?
absolutely. It was all purely based. So if you go back a page,
Okay.
so you'll see, and I was always real into VR, still am. I've got 3 VR headsets.
Yeah.
But, so I wrote a VR story. But if you'll look, the red comes forward, and then as you get towards blue, it recedes. So you'll see the little spikes are red fading into blue. So that was so that they would have a 3-dimensional feel, even on an individual level. And the lettering is going to come all the way forward. That's why we did the red.
Oh, okay.
And then the black is going to be the farthest most. So it goes from warm to cool and then black.
Got it.
She had to wear the Valiant Vision glasses while she painted, or at least constantly checked. And she ended up having to get glasses, like eyeglasses, because she had.
Probably messed up her eyes, huh?
Yeah, she got past it, but I mean, it was 6 months of having to wear regular eyeglasses where she'd never had any real.
Oh, so the red's in front, the blue's in the back. Okay,
Yep.
got it.
So you see those greens and blues are going to be pushing farther back. And
That's really cool.
yeah,
I never knew that. That's interesting. So that's why it worked really well for Solar, because he's always up front.
yep, that was the idea. And so Peter Grau drew this, and he's just a great artist, very talented, skilled guy. And I think he enjoyed doing the stuff we did here. So this was all talking about what production artists do. So he drew these lines, black on white, and this sort of wireframe mesh. And then that came into our office, and we made a negative, and then made a photocopy of the negative, and you end up with black with white lines.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's all cut out and pasted down onto the original art.
Oops, excuse me for this advertising break. So interesting. It makes so much sense now. And the lettering's all red, so
Yep.
everything would pop, basically.
That was the idea, and and I was really excited about this. And then we did the Valiant Vision starter kit, or whatever we called it.
Did this sell books? Did this actually move
Yeah.
units?
Yeah, it pushed units. It was kind of amazing. But yeah, it did. And I think I had just developed the idea of Solar the Destroyer just before we did this. So that was the idea. If we put him in space, we can have black backgrounds. But you can, if you know me and you know my interests, you can kind of track my interests through my books. You can see history when you read The Eternal Warrior. You can see that. You can see a recurring theme of friendship and loyalty and betrayal, and that kind of thing. And that's my wife, my ex-wife. So,
Oh, there we go. Nobro profile.
yeah. So Bob, I'm pretty sure Bob named it. Could have been Jim. But Nobro was called Nobro because they're all really great, talented artists. They just, like knobs, they just need a little twisting to get them perfect.
That's pretty fun.
So Nobro was the artists, and Park Avenue was the suits. It was the accountants and lawyers and stuff like that. My desk was at the corner of Nobro and Park Avenue because I spoke both languages. Yeah,
So what else, Kevin? Any untold stories that as we land this plane, like any untold stories that come to mind that 35 years later now you can probably share?
Yeah, I had a story idea that I wanted to do in 2012, and I've told the story, and I won't go into names. But one of the gentlemen that was starting up with Dinesh met with me, and I thought to talk about us doing new stories. And he said, "I just want to let you know the reason I'm not giving you work isn't because you're old." And I'm like 42 or whatever it was. It was like I'm not that old, and I'm sitting there thinking, it's like I don't think I'm more than like 4 years older than you, dude. And so we didn't do anything. And then they contacted me about writing a story for the Bloodshot. I guess it would have been, I don't know if it was the Omnibus. It probably would have been before the Omnibus. It was probably the little Bloodshot Masterworks, but I did an 8-page story. But my original pitch was I wanted to do a story that was kind of like a Star Trek Next Generation bottle show, where it's using clips from the comics, but drawn newly, so they're from a different angle. So that we would realize that the Eternal Warrior had been tracking and following Bloodshot from the time he had escaped from Rising Spirit. So he was at the airport. So I wanted to do the shot where you see him witnessing Bloodshot blow that guy's brains out, and all these different moments that would build up to it. So I wanted to open it up with Bloodshot's entering into his apartment, and Eternal Warrior flips him and knocks him on his back. And then they start having a conversation, and so it mirrored the first time that we see Bloodshot when Eternal Warrior, or when Bloodshot opens the door and knocks Galad down. It says, "Galad Abrams, I have questions." And what I wanted to do, because Bloodshot can control machines, is have him essentially play all these files off on a computer screen or a monitor or a TV monitor. But I was told that nobody would know those stories. And I said, literally every story I want to reference is in the book that they are holding. And it's like, well, my mom wouldn't get that. It's like, your mom is not my Bloodshot fan. She is not my demographic. It just died. So I never got to tell that story. So I wrote a brand new 8-pager that Don drew, and then I called up Bob Wyachek, and we got him to ink it. So it was the same team that did Bloodshot 1. That's one of the stories I always wanted to tell. I just always thought that would be really cool to realize that Galad was already trying to determine whether or not Mortali would be somebody that they would want to bring into MI6 and all that stuff.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun story.
Yeah, I think it would have been a blast. And again, it's tied into the book you're holding, so it's
right.
Like,
yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I don't know why they thought that wouldn't work.
Yeah, well, yeah. So but anyway, where are you two from?
I'm in Virginia.
Virginia and what?
Mississippi.
Mississippi. I grew up in Kentucky and Indiana primarily, but it's been in California for 31 years. So I moved out here in '94. Well, very cool. Any other thoughts or questions?
Well, I think Carl, because of his obsession with seedy hotels, was really wanting like some deep, dark thing. Because I think the statute of limitations after 30 years has passed, just so you know. So I think he was looking for like some seedy hotel story.
No,
because Bob was on here. He talked about, I think it was Bob, wasn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but how he would be like, would grab people and hold them and,
Sean was talking about that. Yeah, Sean told us how like Bob used to jump on desks and like show him the moves, like kung fu moves, and then also he would like grab like one of the girls I was working with, as like a sample of like how he wanted certain position. He's like, "Oh, let her go." So I thought that was pretty funny.
So he was putting like the seedy hotels, Bob playing, the parts together. I don't know.
And the big royalty checks and the Aerosmith buses. My imagination just goes wild. I'm sorry, guys.
That's funny. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
You have been the only guy doing all the work. That's why Valiant exists.
Where was I when we were grabbing girls and putting them in chokehold? We did often pose for stuff. I mean, different people would pose for stuff. And so Andrew Wendell, when you're flipping through Bloodshot Zero, I can see the photographs in my head because I took Polaroids of Andrew posing for different bad guys getting shot and stuff like that. I will say this, and I've said it before, but when you really look at it as far as the amount of time I was there, so I didn't finish the thought a while ago that you asked me, but I left in the deal for Acclaim closed in early June, and I left like the 7th or something like that from 94, moving across country to San Diego, and I set up signings all the way across the country so I could go see family, but I didn't have to stay too long because I could say, I got to be in Austin on Saturday. Sorry. And so I did that, and we taught my kids how to swim in hotel pools along the way because we had a swimming pool in the house we were moving to. And but when you look at it, my whole Valiant experience while I was in the office, I continued to write for him for another year and a half or so, but it was really only about 2 years and 3 months. And it just
there's that starter kit that we talked about earlier.
There's Neil's piece.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I have a mock-up he did. It's his colors.
Nice.
That's pretty cool. I need to track it down. I found it right before I moved, but I don't know what I did with it.
Did he actually bring it into the office himself, or did he just like?
Yeah, no, he sat there with me and we went over.
And drew it.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, he finished the painting because he was doing the marketing. But, he came out of advertising as well. Just really. I mean, Neil was brilliant at what he did. But yeah, it was, and so my wife is on one side of a table and I'm on the other, and he's sitting there, doing stuff, and we're talking about the whole theory about red receding and blue. Red coming forward and blue receding and all that. And then and then it kind of made sense. I mean, I could tell from just looking at our regular comics what was popping and not, but looking at it from a design standpoint really came out of talking with Neil and my wife.
So I'm sure on some things it's just like, hey, who's available to draw this cover or start this project? But was it that did somebody say, yourself included, say Neil's the guy to draw this, or how did that come about?
I think it was probably Bob that had the idea. I may have said, Neil Adams is really into 3D because
Okay.
But yeah,
That's a jam.
I don't know if you know who Ray Zone is, but Ray Zone was somebody who I think also did work out of continuity, and I may have that wrong, but he was Mr. 3D. So in the 80s and 90s, if you ever saw a 3D comic book or like the 3D version of the Betty Pages or something like that, Ray Zone was always doing the separation. And so that's how come I knew about Neil's passion for 3D and for time travel, but we never did use him for time travel.
Yeah. Dan Moeller, who is in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
He's an OG, man. He definitely says something that I think we all also agree with. Definitely lasting impact in all those years, Kevin. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. No, and I think very highly of Dan as well. He's a good guy.
Yeah. He's the OG Valiant fan. But, with that said, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your stories, man. It's super valuable. And it looked like you're the reason that Valiant made it through all those years because you're the workhorse.
One of many people that did a lot of cool stuff and got to do a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, what a fun gig in like your mid-20s and in the midst of all that.
No, it was one of those things because I had not read their books and I thought they were interesting, but I hadn't really read them. And then, to get there and at the time they had printed a sum total of about 40 Valiant comics that were not like Nintendo. And Jim gave me a set of those 40 books and I went back and read them that night.
Wow.
I knew where we were.
Awesome. So yeah, with that said, I think we covered everything. We appreciate you, Kevin, all that you've done,
Absolutely.
and hope to have you back on the show at some point, maybe later when we
Circle all the way back when we get to Alien books. We'll have you come and talk about your story. We'll get there. We'll get there one day.
Well, very cool. Nice to see you guys. And
Thank you,
yeah.
Lee. Kevin, stay on. We gotta upload your stream. So everyone else, thank you for checking in at Valiant TLDR, and we will see you guys soon enough.
Thanks, Lee. See ya.